Hey friends, and welcome to the Living Life with Wendy podcast, where we connect as entrepreneurs, as women in business, as professionals, and as humans who are just interested in personal development and living our best lives. I'm Wendy Easton Bowman, your host, coach, and cheerleader. So buckle up, friends, because you're in for some learning and motivation. Let's get started living our lives and leaning into our joy. Hey all, and welcome to the Living Life with Wendy podcast. And today we welcome Michelle Merritt, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at DNS Executive Management. Drawing on her 20-year corporate career as a Fortune 500 recruiter and corporate culture executive, Michelle provides a wealth of experience for her clients. Today, she guides executive leaders through the end-to-end job search process, from resume writing to negotiating offers. As a sought-after speaker and trainer, Michelle is a trusted source for leading-edge trends affecting senior-level job seekers and board candidates. Michelle is recognized as a civic and local leader. She serves on several community and volunteer boards. So join me today in welcoming Michelle to our podcast. Michelle, before we start into today's podcast, you are a Guinness World Record holder.
I am.
Share with my listeners all about that. I'm very interested.
Right. So I in the city of Fort Wayne, Indiana, hold the Guinness record for the largest high heel race in the world. And it's 967 walkers. To my knowledge, the record still stands today. But in 2010, the city of Fort Wayne got behind an initiative called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. It's actually a national initiative, but in Fort Wayne, it supported the Fort Wayne Women's Bureau and the Rape Crisis Center.
Oh.
And it encourages men to come out and walk a mile in 4-inch red high heels, which is this here for those of you who can see the video. And so we encourage men throughout the entire community to step out and speak out against sexual assault and raise money. So on an average, we raised about $100,000 a year hosting that event. And there's the Guinness record right behind me. So it's a truly proud moment that I had sharing it with some exceptional people in that community. So truly a career accomplishment.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Whenever we get an opportunity to give back, step into, service, I think it just changes the world. So I appreciate you for that and participating in that event. Now, Michelle, you are a CFO of a really interesting business. And for my listeners, who are mostly women, by the way, but we do have some gentlemen as well. A lot of my listeners, they're looking either to switch careers or climb the corporate ladder. And you are the CFO for DNS Executive Management. Can you tell my listeners a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah. So as Chief Strategy Officer within DNS, I have a couple roles here. So obviously, I'm navigating the strategy of the business, right? I collaborate directly with our CEO, Deborah Boggs, and we are moving the organization forward. Deborah and I launched our businesses separately, but as friends, parallel to one another 12 years ago. And over the years, we combined business and we traded business back and forth, and we always supported one another. Our husbands are friends. We've been friends for years. And so in 2022, we sat down and talked about it and realized it was time to merge the businesses. And so we merged our company into DNS Executive Career Management, which has been a great experience. And we're so excited that we did that. That said, I also coach our executive clients and still write a few executive resumes. I don't write as many executive resumes as I used to, but I do a large amount of coaching in the job search process, in the interview process, salary negotiation. I do a lot of salary negotiation coaching. And then we also help executives seeking their first board role. And we also work with small to medium-sized companies that are doing executive outplacement.
Okay. So that's a lot to take in for the listeners.
Right.
You do a lot. But I think from all of that, it's really about working with those executives, right?
It
Or
is.
do you also work with people who are like on the impetus of getting into that executive role?
We do. And they're some of my favorite clients to work with. I'm got to be careful there because I have lots of C-level executives that I love as well. But the people who are taking that brave step forward to say, okay, it's time, it's my turn, right? And we see women who are so often afraid to do that if they don't feel 100% qualified for the role, right? Here's the dirty secret: our male peers, they're stepping into those roles when they feel 40% qualified.
Ah, okay. So
right?
why? And you make such a good point. So what's the difference? Why are women holding themselves back and waiting to be, let's air quote this, ready for the role, where men just sort of like lean in?
They do lean in. And let me be clear, I am not in any way discounting what our male peers do. I think we need to mirror that. Right. And so I want us to go do that. And I think the reason we do it is as women is because people have told us our whole lives, put your head down, do the work. And if you're good enough, you'll get noticed. And good enough often means considerably better than everyone else in the room. And then if you're lucky and nice and you smile enough and all the things, that then it might actually come together for you, right? Where when we're taking that step forward in faith to say, I've got this. And what I don't have, I can pick up because I'm good at what I do and I've earned this seat at the table. That's the difference, right? And so while I love working with our executive clients, my favorite clients to work with are the ones that are stepping into that for the first time, because it takes so much courage.
Okay. So it does take courage. So let's talk to that woman at that level, wanting to take that. And you said we need to mirror what the men do. So what are they doing that we're not? I would love to hear from you.
So they're doing a couple of things. Number one, they're willing to step forward. They're willing to say, I've got this, right? So like we just talked about. Number two, they know what they've accomplished already, right? They can rattle off the top of the head all the things that they've done, and they don't use the word we. They use the word I. Right? When they're talking about their accomplishments, they're owning those accomplishments. Women will most likely say, well, I led the team to do this. We did this. We did that. Right? Our male clients, and we work with both groups, certainly. But our male clients are saying, I've led the team that did that. I drove this. I did that. Right? There's an ownership there and it doesn't mean that they're not proud of the team. It's not that they're not acknowledging it, but they're taking ownership of their role in a way that so many women do not.
That is so true. Yeah. Because I work with a lot of clients that are like, either about to go into that C-suite level, that executive level. And you are so right. That is their language. They talk about the we rather than the I. And it's primarily because that's the way we've been brought up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's a word I don't use that women often get described as, right? When we take care of ourselves first. But this is how we not only take care of ourselves, this is how we take care of our families. This is how we plan for the future. This is how we save for retirement. We have earned the right to be in this spot, and it's time we take that step forward.
Okay. I love that. So any advice for those ladies? I know we have to lean into it. We got to be sure. Yeah. We have to stop using the word we. Anything else? Because
know your accomplishments.
Okay.
Right. So when my team comes in and writes a resume for a client, right, we're asking things like, what are you proud of? Where'd you make an impact? Tell me the stories so that we can then take those stories and distill them into 2-sentence bullet points. So data and metrics, where available and appropriate, are always great things to know. Back in the pre-digital era, I'm going to date myself for a minute. We used to keep what we called brag books, right? Of newspaper articles or reviews or things like that were showing what we've done, right? You can still keep that brag book. Some people still keep it in paper, but keep that file folder in your Dropbox or in the cloud that is all the things that you've done, the great reviews you've had, projects you've completed, all of those sort of things, so that we can start to demonstrate the achievements. And when you own that, when you have those numbers, when you know those numbers and that data, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a dollar figure, right? It could be percentages, it could be sizes of teams, there could be efficiency increases, could be 1,000 things. When we have that, what we start to take ownership, right? We see ourselves differently when we think, God, I forgot I even did that. Right. So when we start tracking that, we can then articulate it more clearly.
Okay. So I'm already hearing the benefit of working with an organization or a business like yours, because
Right.
you're crafting a specific CV or resume by gathering that information from your client. And it's something that, because of your expertise, you're able to really zone in on what the employer is going to look for when they're looking for that C-suite individual.
Absolutely. But they're also looking for more than just data points, right? They're looking, and this is a thing that women tend to struggle with. We want to say that we're doers, right? I don't ask anything of my team that I wouldn't do myself, right? That's not how it's going for our male peers. Our male peers are saying, this is what I did. This is how I led, right? When we're stepping into the C-suite or that SVP or EVP role, they're looking for visionary leadership. They're looking for overarching leadership, right? They're not looking for the doer anymore. So one of the challenges that we see people facing is really articulating that change from going from being a doer to being a leader at that high level, right? So it's a change in language. It's a change in how we position it, right? We talk about leading, we talk about inspiring, we talk about forecasting, we talk about visions, we talk about budgets, we talk about financial responsibility, all of those things. We don't talk about the tactical in the interviews or in the resume as much as you would the other way around.
So would it be fair to say that the focus on influence and persuasion would be really at a heightened level when you're...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your network can be something worth talking about in these conversations, right? So you mentioned influence. Influence can be internally and externally, right? So your network can become a vital part and a vital asset for an organization that you're talking with.
Interesting. So does that put some people at a disadvantage, specifically women, when it comes to network?
I don't think so, because I think anyone can cultivate a strong network, right? And I think networks are the bread and butter of our the way we propel ourselves forward professionally. What we know is that 85% of all positions are found through people we know. That's a statistic from LinkedIn, and they own the biggest job board.
They
right? So if we're going to talk to someone about that, that's who we tend to listen to. And at 85% of those positions coming from people we know, what that means is those are the people who have the hidden jobs, right? Those are the people who know what's happening somewhere else, right? What do I mean by a hidden job? I mean, those are the positions that aren't necessarily posted online. Those are the positions. And the higher up we go, the more often those jobs are hidden, right? Or they've already been selected before they're ever posted on the internet.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing like relationship building is really important as well as you build your career.
Absolutely. And I think women will often say, I've got to put my head down and get the work done because I've got to be an A+ student, right? And then we don't take the time to build those relationships. And those relationships come in a variety of forms. So they come from being in a good relationship with our peers, but they can be with our stakeholders, right? They can be with other women in our community. They can be in professional organizations, things like that. It can come from a variety of places. And remember that your network isn't just people you do business with or have done business with. Your network is really made up of everyone you know. You know, everyone in my job can tell you some story about your neighbor's brother's cousin's sister's friend who, was the key to opening up the next opportunity.
Okay. And I like that a lot. So, I think this is like advice that should come on earlier, even before you even, conceptualize going into those executive roles is like that relationship building and how our behaviors need to shift specifically as women, right? Where we're not just always proud of the accomplishment, but we're also networking along the way. And I've seen that in the corporate world. And you're right. Those people that are really good at that, they're the ones. They may not be of highest competence because it's not always about competence, right? It is about, like you said, who you know and who you're networking with.
Absolutely. And I'm going to hear a lot of women tell me, but I'm an introvert, right? Michelle, you're talking, you talk for a living. It's easy for you, but I'm an introvert. Bottom line, so am I, right? This is not introversion and extroversion. Number one is about where you draw your energy from.
It's
correct. Not whether or not we like people or not. That's a different challenge. So introverts can make the best networkers because networking doesn't have to be about going to a Chamber of Commerce after hours event, right? Those dreaded, hi, my name is sort of things. And no offense to my people who work for chambers. I love them. But they are also about making real connections with people. Networking is about making the connection with someone, right? And introverts do that best because they're good in quiet spaces.
Yeah. So, and they make great linchpins.
They do.
Yeah. And so I use that terminology. Some people don't really understand what I mean, but they're the person who is the connector between two people. So when you think of that linchpin, and I believe, I truly believe that the introverts, that's their superpower.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah. Because they have that ability to stand back, right? Rather than wanting to be forward. And that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that because you're right. We can put those roadblocks in front of ourselves because we have this, this limiting belief that if we are A, B, or C, it sort of like pockets us into something. And sounds like to me, Michelle, that you don't believe in that.
I don't believe in those things because I do think we have the ability, especially if we understand our strengths, we understand our core values, we really can choose what we want to do. Now, that it may not always be an easy road, let's be clear. But I do think that you can choose what you want to do next, right? And it's a matter of making sure aligning yourself with the right people, aligning yourself with the right organization, being strategic in that approach, because that is one of the challenges, right? Is that we'll oftentimes we get so attached to one potential opportunity that we make a bad choice, right? Instead of really evaluating where we want to go. Several years ago, I turned down my dream job because the person told me, I'd always said, if this person came calling for this role, the answer was yes, no matter what.
Okay.
Right. It was just one of those dream scenarios for me. And that person finally came calling. And in that role, they told me I had to give up ownership of my current company. Never in my life will I prevent myself from taking care of my own finances. Never going to happen. So we came to an impasse and I turned it down.
Wow.
I knew what my values were. I knew where the long-term gain would be. And it wasn't going to be working for someone else in my case. So here we are, we've merged the businesses. And so I guess technically I am back to working for someone else, but it's in a very different circumstance.
Well, yes and no, right? Because it is, like you said, it's a partnership. And so you said like you did merge, you are working with this other person. Here's the interesting question, because one of the things you said is the reason why you said no was because it didn't align with your values. Right. So how you doing now? How's it align with your values now?
It's a great question. What we do at DNS and how we come alongside people and support our clients, really taking that individualized approach to each client is where my value lies. Many, many years ago, my career started in executive recruiting. And what I did really well as an executive recruiter was on the candidate side. It was working with the candidates and it was helping them prepare, helping them find their dream job, helping them figure out what was right for their family or their unique situation. I was never great at that business development, 150 phone calls a day sort of thing, right? Now, Deborah, our CEO, she's great at that business development piece. And of course, our client success person, Carmen, she's amazing at that too. So I came into a team where we all are playing to our strengths. And it's the greatest thing I could have asked for.
Which leads me to an interesting thing about you, by the way, because it's on your LinkedIn profile, it's on your bio for when we gather our information about our clients, is you are a coach in Clifton Strengths. So I am a big fan of psychometric tools. Clifton Strengths is one of them. So tell me, how does that play in your role? You said you coach your clients, right? And you've talked about leaning into your strengths a couple of times. So tell me a little bit more how people can leverage Clifton Strengths or any other psychometric tool to really help them with their career.
Yeah. So I have a motto that is fix what's right with you. Right. That's my personal motto. Right. So the thing I love about Clifton Strengths specifically is that it focuses in on what's working. People, for those of you who are not familiar, it gives you your top 34 themes of talent. Right. And what they know is that so far, they have not found two people with the exact same themes of talent. It's inevitable that they will one day, I'm sure, but so far they have not. And a lot of people are tempted to look immediately at the bottom of the list, right? What are the things I'm bad at? What's number 34, right? Instead of staying at the top. And what I always encourage people to do is focus in on what are those top 5, those top 10, right? So for me, that's positivity, it's communication, it's relationship, things like that. But that allows me, when I focus in on what I'm good at, life gets a little easier, right? Even the hard things get a little easier when that's the case. So, and I will tell you, the first time I took the assessment, this is in my LinkedIn profile, you might have read this. The first time I took the assessment, I hated what it said about me. I thought, it says I'm an overgrown cheerleader, which I was a cheerleader for many years. And I put it in a drawer. And then a colleague 3 years later said, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Pull it back out. Let's read it. And when she explained it to me, it turned out the world could use an extra cheerleader.
And you know what? You made a very good point, right? That many people will do psychometric assessments. And without a coach to do the debrief, it can get very misinterpreted.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have another such, I am familiar with Clifton Strengths, and I do agree with you. What I love about that tool is that it does encourage people to lean into their strengths, their preferences, because you're right. It brings more joy. When you're happier at work, you're going to thrive. And you said something really interesting too, that our natural tendency is to look at the bottom, because I believe that we were brought up, and it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, by the way, that we have to work on our weaknesses to be successful. But what Clifton teaches us is, okay, you know what? You don't have to be good at everything. Lean into what you're good at and then fill the gaps with other people. And that's what great leaders do.
Right. Right. You bet. You bet. And, number 34 for me is deliberative, right? And intellect is down at the bottom too. So, I'm not purposely intelligent is what you could read that to say. But what it really means is that I use different strengths to find my way there.
Yeah, exactly. So again, if anyone's listening, if you do a psychometric tool online, it's great. But if you really want to learn about yourself, make sure you employ a coach who's certified in that psychometric tool so they can debrief you.
Completely agree.
That's very important. Now, let's get back to women, right?
Yes.
Now, one of the gaps for women, and I've recognized this in my career and I've seen it with other women, we have this thing about negotiation. And specifically around money. Like, I'm starting to feel like my listeners starting to wiggle in their chairs right now when I say that. It makes women specifically very uncomfortable when we have to negotiate our salary. So what words of advice do you have for women who are in that seat?
So the very first thing I'll say is that this is what changed it for me. I realized that when I did not negotiate the extra $10,000 in my first job that I could have had, right? I didn't know that was the range. I could have asked for more. I didn't. Over the lifetime of my career, that turned into $1.4 million.
Yikes.
Right? So if I had taken that 10,000, invested that same 10,000 every year in my 401k, basic boring 401k, no risk, 4 or 5%, it comes out to about $1.4 million by the time I retire over 40 years.
Yeah.
Right. So if $1.4 million won't help you advocate for yourself, um, I would love to be you if that's the case. But what I'll also say is that women tend to think they shouldn't talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in society, we say, oh, that's inappropriate. Right. We shouldn't talk to each other about money. I was coaching my best friend through her salary negotiation just recently, moving from a VP to an EVP role. We've been friends for 20 years. And there was a hesitation when I said, I need you to tell me what you make.
Mm.
Where are we at now? Where are we going? Right. We've been best friends for 20 years. Right. I had an idea, but there was a hesitation because it's just inappropriate to talk about in society. So, but when we tell women that it's inappropriate, what we're really doing is keeping you down. Because when we advocate for one another, when we understand what someone else makes, we can step forward and say, I've earned the right to do that too. So the very first thing I would say is advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to talk about the number. And then the other thing I would say is start knowing what your automatic yes and your automatic no numbers are when it comes time to start negotiating, whether that's internally or externally. Looking into an external organization, it can be easier to negotiate salary, but you can negotiate internally as well, right? When you are looking at a promotion, things like that. Understand where the salary bands are, where you fit, all of that kind of thing.
So important, because many organizations now, they publish their salary bands. Mm-hmm. So you got to do a little bit of homework.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Do a little homework, know your industry. There are sites that you can go to, Glassdoor, PayScale, there are others. LinkedIn used to have a great tool. They've since taken it down, but there are lots of tools where you can find that data for your industry, for your title, for your location, your geography. And that geography's gotten weird, right? Since 2020, not everybody's in the same location and things like that. So that can play a little bit into it, but it doesn't have to play into it very much. And then it's really knowing, I would say, know your automatic yes and your automatic no. What is the offer that if it's this, I don't have to check in with anybody at home. I can say yes immediately. I never advise that, but you can. And then if it's below this, no matter how much I love you, I can't do it.
It's a hard stop. No,
it's a hard stop. It's a hard no. Right. Yeah. So those are everything else in between is negotiable, but those are our boundaries for negotiation.
100%. And boundaries are important. And
always.
For sure. And as natural nurturers, boundaries are hard. Right. So I love that you said that. And so I've got to bring up something in your bio because I said I was going to bring it up when we were first talking. You said you cannot be faint of heart to work with Michelle. So I think it was faint of heart. I said, yeah, you got to, and it's something about doing the work. And I would love to ask you more about what that means to you.
Okay. Yeah. So I if I'm not mistaken, I think it is, I don't suffer fools.
And, yes, that's what it was. Sorry. My words were faint of heart.
Very similar. Very similar. I don't believe in a pity party, right? So this is hard work. Let's just get real. And I think that's the other thing. We as women tell everyone, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Right? Oh, no, got the job search under control. It's fine. It's fine. Right? I hate that word, fine. But, in truth, this is hard. And that moment when you're stepping out, you're going to get that feeling in your belly, right? That says, "Oh, I'm going too far. I don't like this." That kind of thing. Stay there, right? Stay in that spot. Your gut's going to tell you to pull back. Don't do it, right? Because your gut has been taught the same thing you have, which is to stand down, and that's not okay.
No, it's not.
So, that's what I always tell women, step forward in this, understand that you've earned it. It is going to be uncomfortable. That's okay. We can do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
We do the hard stuff every day.
Every day. We do much harder stuff than looking for a job and getting our seat at the table of that level, right? We do way harder things.
Absolutely we do.
So I appreciate that you said that. And I love that you said. The other thing you said is you got to be willing to do the work. And so what does that mean? Like, because it can get scary, we can be uncomfortable, but what does doing the work mean?
Right. It's activating your network, right? It's having those uncomfortable conversations, right? To say, hey, this is going on in my life, right? And I value your input. Can we talk? And doing it over and over and over again, right? That's the hard part. Doing it over and over and over again. Right. I coached a client this week. She is a C-level executive with a major healthcare background. And as she said, Michelle, I've been doing this so long, I'm just exhausted. I get it, right? These searches take 3 to 6 months, 6 months to 12 months, depending on how high up you go, right? These things take a long time. Finding a job is a full-time job. Yeah. And it can be emotionally devastating. Another client said to me just yesterday, I'm spent and it's been 3 weeks. And I said, I get it. I do. I completely get it. But you can't quit. You can. You're just not going to get the outcome that you want.
Right.
Right. So we have to keep going. So building a plan around it, I always say treat this like your best and most important project. So you are your most important project. What would you do about the most critical project at work, right? It would be mapped out. You would have stakeholders identified. You would be bringing in experts. You would be doing all of the things. Treat your job search the same way.
Yeah.
Because in fact, it's more important than what you're working on at work.
Yep. And it would apply to even entrepreneurs. I hear like the
Absolutely.
same, right? It's be courageous, embrace the uncomfortable, ask. It's the ask that scares people.
And the follow-up. That's the other piece, right? So people will say to me, well, I talked to everyone in the first month and now nothing's happening. Well, have you called back the people you talked to the first day? Well, no. Have you updated the person who, and we're always asking, number one, networking is never one-sided, right? A conversation should always be, how can I help you?
Yeah.
Right. How do I help you? But it's also, who else do you know? I don't leave a single conversation without saying, who else do I need to know?
That's important. It's the referral, right? Like who
it's
do
the
you
referral.
know that I don't know?
Right. And so who do I need to talk to? And I go and in a search like that, I go and reach out to every single person that I'm referred to. As long as I'm not morally opposed to the person, I am reaching out to every single person. And when I connect with that person, I'm following back up with the person who recommended them so that I'm staying top of mind, because that follow-up allows us to stay top of mind. When you and I leave each other today, this was a pleasant conversation. We're not going to be thinking about each other tonight, right? We move on to the other things in our lives. It's our job to stay top of mind with the person that we're networking with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look at me. I just made a big contact today. And so did my listeners, by the way. So big, right? Huge. So I love that. And, the other thing that I experienced too, and I wonder if you're seeing this in women in looking at building their careers, is there's this sense that I'm not enough of something, right? Or I'm too of something, like too old to get near the end of my career, whatever that looks like, or I'm not experienced enough. Like there's so many, I see that so much more in women than I do in men, of the I'm not enough, or I have to wait for this. So like, what would you advise people? Like, I know you said men are 40% ready, they go. And so, but it's so conditioned in women, like what can they do to practice a little bit more, I guess, affirmation and recognition of worthiness, I guess?
Fair enough. So I think part of it is owning those accomplishments, right? Because when we start to own those accomplishments and those achievements, we become more confident, right? We stand up a little taller. We feel it a little more, right? And we think, gosh, I really did do that. I've earned that, right? And instead of saying, I would like, we change that to I have earned, right?
I love that.
I have earned the right to ask. I have earned the right to interview. I have earned the right to sit at that table.
It is
because
a lot of self-belief. I'm hearing self-belief and self-talk, and it's a powerful tool.
On a tough day, I still look myself in the mirror and find at least one thing that I like about myself.
Hmm.
That sounds really corny, but I'm going to date myself again. A very long time ago in a Cosmopolitan magazine when I was in my 20s, I read an article about just stand in front of the mirror and find one thing you like about yourself. And then the next day, find another and another. And people ask me all the time, how did you build your self-confidence, right? That's how I built my self-confidence. I literally stood in the mirror after reading a Cosmopolitan article. This is so corny. I can't believe I'm admitting it. And I literally, and the first day, all I could come up with was my nose. I'm like, I have a cute nose. I'll go with that.
Okay.
Right. And then the next day it was something else and something else. And at first it was physical, but it also became so much more than that.
Mm.
And on a tough day, when being a mom is hard and all the other things and the business is making me crazy or whatever, I still do it.
Yeah.
To this day.
I love that. I love that because it's like we do need to be, since you're such a cheerleader, me too, we do need to be our own advocates and cheerleaders because we're not always going to have those people telling us the stuff we need to hear every day.
Right. And I surround myself with people who lift me up.
Mm-hmm.
The people who don't get to stay. And that's a really hard lesson to learn. I'll be 50 here in a few weeks, and I will tell you that it has probably taken me till at least in my early 40s to figure that out. Right. But I think it's really important to be selective about who we choose to let in. Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to be closed off, but the people that get to influence your everyday, be picky about them.
Yeah. And I've heard that before. You got to choose your tribe. You got to surround yourself with the people that are going to lift you up and not break you down.
You bet.
Yep. Same thing. Okay.
And you need the people who are going to tell you the real truth, but tell you in a way that supports you.
That's right. You don't want those people like patting you on the back and telling you lies either, because then you have this false sense of stuff and then you're setting yourself up. But there's so many things that you've said in this interview. Like, first of all, take inventory of your accomplishments and own them. That was a big one for me. And go to those, right? Remind yourself of those accomplishments and don't hold yourself back because you don't feel like your list is long enough. Just go for it.
Just go.
Right? Just go for it. Work with qualified people. Sorry, that's my dog. Work with qualified people who can assist you in like propelling you forward and getting you in the right rooms, like your company. And then finally, I think one more question, because all of those things really matter. But, when you think about women and when they get to the interview and they get that chance to do the things they got to do to get that executive role, what do you think is the one thing that holds women back?
I think it's a lack of confidence. I really do. I think, we go in overly prepared sometimes because we're not feeling confident. And this is one thing I tell women in interviews: don't prepare so hard that your answers are scripted or that you can be tripped up because someone asked the question in a way that you didn't rehearse the answer. Right. That actually happened to me in an interview once, where I swear to you, all I heard was the Peanuts teacher. Right. That was all I heard. That was all I heard. I'm like, I have no idea what you said, because they just asked the question totally differently than I had rehearsed it in order to create my answer. So be confident in the fact that these people are in the room because they want to know you. Right. And you're the expert of you. You are the expert in the room. And the more we prepare for a conversation, right, the more we can find out what we need to know about the role too. Because an interview is about interviewing the interviewer too.
Yes.
Don't miss that. Because we've all stepped into roles at times in our careers thinking this is the thing. And then, boy, it turned out to be a mess because we didn't ask the right questions.
Yeah. And I would assume that at that level, you need to be coming in prepared to ask some questions, because that's the differentiator, right? Like, I know every interview they say, do you have any questions for me? But like when you're at the exec level, whether it be C-suite or above, like they want to hear your question. So be prepared with like authentic questions that matter to you as well. And that, really are connected to the role.
Right. And don't be afraid to dive into the common themes, right? This is something that really sets people apart in executive interviews. If you're detecting a theme, I once sat in on a group of interviews as a consultant, and there were lots of questions around toxic people and around how do you handle the meeting after the meeting, and what do you do when you have a team that isn't gelling, things like this. And not one person that they interviewed that day, and it was for a leadership role, not one person said, I detect a theme. What's going on with your people? Right? After they were all gone, I said, I detect a theme. Tell me what's going on with your people. And they said, well, we have a toxic employee who's a legacy employee. We are not in a position to terminate the person, but they're going to be very angry when they learn they were not selected for this role.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine what you would have learned. They probably wouldn't have told you all of that, but imagine what you would have learned if you had asked about the people. That would have been important information in making your decision. So anytime you detect a theme, if you're suddenly being asked lots of financial questions about how you manage a budget shortfall, or how you manage finances here, or corruption here, or, dig in and say, detecting a theme here, tell me more about. Make the interview a conversation.
Yes.
So that you can get the information you need without being shoved into 2 or 3 questions you're allowed to ask at the end.
I love that. Because what I'm hearing is it's equally important to be a good listener and interviewer in that interview. And I think that's what marks the difference between executive level leadership and a manager.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So, wow, what you shared today, Michelle, is like amazing. I mean, I hope everybody was taking notes during this, because I speak to so many women who are wanting to break through that ceiling and get into C-suite or, VP, EVP, SVP positions, because as I mentioned to you before we even talked, we are under indexed in those roles quite often in the corporate world, but it's time for us to kind of skill up and then trust ourselves to make those moves, because we're paving the path for the future women leaders, as we also had our predecessors do for us. So absolutely. I just want to thank you. And I know I stole that line from you, actually.
No, that's all right. I love it. I was raised by a group of feminists. My grandfather was the first one to teach me feminism. So it's people have stepped out for us. And
absolutely,
it's our obligation to do it for the coming generation.
You bet. So that's why I want to thank you for showing up for my listeners today, because this is what we're all about, right? We're here to lift each other up as women. We're here to encourage and teach what we need to do differently so that we can advance ourselves in our lives, whether it be climbing the corporate ladder, starting our own businesses, or just like personal development. All of the things you said today apply.
Absolutely.
I love it. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Me and my listeners today on the Living Life with Wendy podcast. I just want to thank you for your time. You are amazing. And like I said, I hope everybody took a ton of notes, because there's so much learning. Hey friends, be sure to subscribe to the Living Life with Wendy podcast, and you can also follow me on my other social platforms. I can be found on the World Wide Web at www.wendybowman.com, on Instagram as Coach Wendy Bowman, on Facebook at Resolve Coaching and Consulting, and finally on YouTube as Wendy Easton Bowman. I want to thank you again for joining me on Living Life with Wendy. Now go out there and live your best life.